Hello, hello, and I'm so excited to welcome our next speaker. I have Traquina Smith Branch here, the CEO and founder of Lipstick, that's going to share some really great insights on how to improve yourself. So the personal growth and development piece. She's also very passionate about that area. I'm very honored to have her here at R4Luxe Retreats. And Traquina, I'll turn it over to you.
So, we're going to talk a little bit this morning about strength through authenticity. As Krysta mentioned, I would love to be able to partner with you all if you see fit, or if there's anything of interest to you afterwards through either Q&A, or you can reach out to me and we'll cover all of that at a later time. Let's go ahead and jump right in to our topic and content for today. So as Krysta mentioned, I am TQ. My government name, as I like to say it, is Traquina, but all of my friends call me TQ. So we're friends today, so feel free to call me by that. I thought I'd start by sharing just a little bit about myself. So we can get to know one another. It's our little icebreaker. I am a second generation PK kid. So for those of you that don't know what a PK is, it's a preacher's kid. So I am one of the good ones, a second generation from a musical family. You know, music was always present in our home, holidays, and did a little bit of singing, a little bit of instruments myself. And then when you kind of fork over to my professional life, I have, I think, innately always been a strengths leader. Or when I'm working with or talking with my friends, I'm always looking for the gold within, right? How to pull out the best in them. I'm the optimist of the crew. And a couple of years ago, about 10 years ago, went through some major life challenges and was introduced to yoga, which is a whole nother story and presentation. But from that, really began to understand the importance of the breath and relaxation techniques, and how that really allows you to become more self-assured, grounded, and of course, the byproduct of being healthy. And then from there, Lipstick was born a couple years ago, and we'll talk about that. But through that, realized that my destiny, while I have worked in healthcare for over 20 years, my destiny really is as a leadership coach, partnering with anyone who, whether it's professional or personal, who are in transition, and working with them to make sure that they not only see and understand, but become their best selves as you move through the various seasons in life. So maybe, again, we'll talk about a little bit more as we move forward, but let's talk about Lipstick. If you can go to the next slide. Probably about, yeah, thank you. About 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, I was in a state where I really kept having this feeling that there was more. Like there just has to be something more. And in that, I began to do a lot of reflection. I was still fairly young in my career, very established, but I just didn't feel like I was really tapping into the fullness of what was available to me. I had, at that time, already received, you know, when you're working in the professional or corporate world, you're going to get some assessment. And I'd already had an assessment and knew a little bit about myself. And I'd recently transitioned to a new role. And in transitioning to that new role, was paired with a coach within our organization. And I purposely sought out a coach's assistance to be able to help me understand the culture and how I fit into the culture and how I could become my best self. Fast forward, in doing so, she introduced me to a group, and I went to a retreat. And at that retreat, there was a visualization exercise. And in the visualization exercise, if you've ever had one, you know, the therapy voice came out and take a deep breath in and close your eyes and just relax and bring all of yourself into this present moment. And I was sitting there like, okay, I'm coming. And when I yielded to that moment, something phenomenal happened. I had the opportunity to have a vision through that visualization exercise. And the vision that I saw was a sunrise. And it was the color, and I was looking out in a cliff, off of a cliff. And it went from the greens to the browns to the golds to the orange colors. And all of a sudden I saw this woman figure walk to the edge of the cliff. And in walking to the edge of the cliff, at some point, I saw butterfly wings come out from her back. And it was at that moment that I knew that was me. And it was at that moment that I understood that it was the horizon of me becoming the fullness of who I was destined to be. And from that, after that moment, I was in shock a bit. And the facilitator, she said, now write it out. What did you see? What did you feel? What did you experience? And she said, and then name it. And I was like, okay, well, this is getting weirder as we go. And she said, think of something that you just absolutely love. And I was sitting there like, okay, we are really tripping at this moment. And I sat there and everybody else had their name and I was just struggling. And one of the participants, she was like, well, TQ, do you have yours? And I was like, no, I don't. And she said, well, what do you love? And I was like, well, it sounds crazy. I said, but I love lipstick. And she was like, oh, really? And I began to tell her, I said, I have probably 50 shades of lipstick. And I just believe, I don't care if I don't put my full face on, I can pick the shade for that day. And when I put it on, I just feel like I've turned it up and I can do and accomplish anything. And she said, well, that's your name. And I looked at her and I said, oh, yeah, it's my name. That makes sense. And so from that point, lipstick was born. And what we believe is that finding your shade, your strength, your talent, that portion that is uniquely you, we don't give you anything. We only help you bring out what is already within you and how to lead and allow that to flourish in your life, becoming your authentic self. So when you look at our logo, you can see the gradation of color because it signifies that you will go through various stages. And as you go through stages, different colors, different aromas, different perceptions, different revelations will come forth. But in doing so, it continuously leads you towards your destiny. You'll notice also that the eye in lipstick is in the shape of a woman. It's a reminder for me that is me. And I am not offering something that I learned from someplace else. And, but I'm offering authentically who I am. So what better way to start today's session, right? To talk about how I found my best self and how I was authentically able to show up and then come and offer that to you. So let's go a little bit further in our journey. So today we'll talk about knowing and defining strengths. And then after we do that, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about and giving you a framework of how to identify your strengths. Now, this is not going to be, this is expected to be a starting point for you, not the ending. And so as we go throughout, you may have some questions, you may not understand a few things, but maybe we can get to that later on. And then finally, we'll talk about how you can effectively leverage those strengths in a way that allows you to, as you maneuver, again, you're going to hear me say this a lot today, be authentically you, and how you can position yourself in a posture of strength and confidence, and one that will continuously allow you, as you evolve in life and as you go through different circumstances, you're going to grow and change, as we all do. But in doing so, you don't lose your way. You only become more fine-tuned, like a good old wine. All right. So let's jump right in. What are strengths? So if you look up strengths in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it says that strengths are a quality or state of being. It says that you have the capacity for external or internal endurance. And then it also talks about you have the power to resist external force, or it's a sign of toughness. Okay, so that's Merriam-Webster's dictionary. What I want to talk to you about are how we at Lipstick and in some of the professional development spaces define a strength. And that is a natural talent and ability. Natural, already existing. It's not something that someone gives to you. You know, there's an argument, is a leader born or made? This is something that you already possess. It's just unearthing it. It's almost like finding gold, unearthing it and then dusting it off and cleaning it up and figuring out, okay, is that really the treasure or is there something else? Ironically, when you identify your strengths and you are intentional about developing those strengths, and it's not just one or two, it could be a plethora of strengths. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. When you're intentionally developing them, ironically, the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of strength becomes more applicable in that you are a force to be reckoned. You are developing a toughness. You will enlarge your capacity for carrying, modifying, developing, disseminating the essence of who you are. It reveals your unique and dynamic qualities. It ensures that you find great fulfillment, that place of joy. It also allows you to have a greater sense of awareness and actualization. And of course, in doing so, automatically gives you an internal confidence that you can't buy, that you can't rent. It's an assurity that you can own in and through who you are. Okay, so let's kind of walk forward a little bit further in our journey and talk about, now that you know what strengths are, as we are defining it, how do you figure out what your strengths are? I'll take you back to where I started in our talk, and I have highlighted just a couple of assessments. I think some of you may be familiar with them, some of you may not be, but let's just walk starting from the left. The Myers-Briggs assessment, very commonly used. The Myers-Briggs assessment was established by a mother and daughter team, two psychologists. The daughter was Isabel Briggs Myers and her mother, Catherine Briggs. And what they did is they tried to articulate the personality types of Jung's theory, the psychological theory, and really translate it in a way that can be received by the general public, that helps you understand how you communicate, how you show up and interact with others. Why is that important and helpful? Because a lot of times our growth is organic and you can't really name it. And you sometimes, when you can't name it, you're not able to fully leverage the power and authority and strength that it gives you. So Myers-Briggs, if you're looking to figure out more in a professional space or even personal space, quite frankly, your communication type, that's a good assessment. The DISC is another one. It looks at different behaviors, same vein, different side of the coin, right? There's 4 different areas: your dominance, influence, steadiness, conscientiousness. All of these things important, maybe elements or themes you can pull on as you move through your personal or professional life. Again, just a deciding factor of what would be best for you. The third one is EQ, so emotional quotient. When I talk to students, I tell them all the time, when I first was introduced to emotional intelligence, I was thrilled, because although I was smart, I wasn't a straight A student, right? I wasn't that person that aced all of the SAT, ACTs, got stellar scores. I was always that one that was right on the bubble. Right. But then when I found out about emotional intelligence, I was like, oh, boo, This is all me all day, because I figured out that my ability to be able to connect with others was a talent that I was not leveraging. And so that assessment helped me further, again, unlock and understand who I was and how I showed up. There's 4 different categories, and I'll quickly kind of walk through them: self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal communication, decision making, and then stress management. Really, really 4 great domains that, if you're looking to become grounded in who you are, is a great assessment to consider. While I am certified in facilitating EQ assessments, I really love utilizing the Clifton strengths. And Lipstick really, as I begin to move forward in developing and growing in the personal development space, really became the part of the foundation that we use when we work with partners. The Clifton Strengths Finder is a 117 question assessment. It was designed by Don Clifton. It's about 50 years old. And through that assessment, it asks a series of questions to understand there's not a good or a bad, but more, what is your natural, right? Sound familiar? Your natural talents. They call them talents. They eventually moved over to the strengths segment. So it was very, what is the word? Serendipitous. That there's such a parallel that I didn't know at the time of my vision. But when you take the Clifton Strengths Finder, what I appreciate about it is it gives you a range of 34 strengths, right? So I talked a little bit earlier about, it's not 1, it's not 2, it's not 3 or 4, it's 34 different characteristical strengths that you can look at and understand. Now you have your top 5. And those are the ones that are probably more dominant, that you use and that you lean on, or that you find you move in and out of more fluidly. But then there's some in the middle that you may use, but you may not use as much, right? And then you have those at the bottom. And those at the bottom aren't, again, good or bad, but they just mean you may not pull on those as much. However, they are equally as important, because if they're at the bottom of the range, it also gives you perspective of where you may have blind spots. How does that show up? And we'll talk about that. So again, there's 4 different tools and assessments that you can use. There's a small cost to some of them. There are free tools that you can leverage as well, but I have found these are more of the scientifically proven and tried and true and widely accepted, and ones that you can find the greatest value. So let's go to the next slide and talk about, well, how can I identify my strengths? So I've talked about the assessments, and you may say, oh, I'm not quite ready for that yet. I want to take a small step. So one of the exercises that I do with some of the students that I work with is I challenge them, and we'll do that real quick. Just think of a project or an activity, whether work related or not, where you have participated, led, and where you felt alive. Just doing it, being in the environment, just gave you a sense of energy. You felt rejuvenated, invigorated, in the zone, they say, as you were walking through. So just, take a moment, and as I'm talking, write down, what was the project? What were you doing? Who were you working with? Was it alone, or was it with someone else, or a group of people? Think about what were maybe 3 or 4 skills or competencies you were leveraging. Was it strategic? Were you being influential? Were you very task? Are you an executor? And then once you make a couple of those in your list, think about, have I used those before? And those same competencies or skills or strengths that you've outlined, if you've used them before, did you have the same feeling? And if you've had the same feeling with that one, think of another one, right? Because 1 is kind of like, oh, okay, that's interesting. 2 is like, oh, that might be a mistake. 3 times, that's a trend, right? We know that that may be your core. And if you were able to identify 3 or more different scenarios, projects, or tasks in which you've leveraged those skills, it's a good chance those are your strengths. Now, this is just a quick exercise, right? And if you take a step back, why did I walk you through that? Because although you can have the assessments, which I do encourage, sometimes you have to start with just some self-reflection. And as you get the self-reflection, it allows you to begin to create a framework in and of yourself. Just what are the spaces that bring you joy, right? And how you can position yourself from a place of strength and authenticity. And then as you begin to move forward and evaluate how you want to leverage them, it gives you a different perspective. So let's go to the next slide and talk about how we want to leverage it. So we've talked about how you can identify it and identifying what you do best, and then leveraging it. So leveraging it just means having the right tool for the right job, right? Having the right response to the right action, having the appropriate positioning yourself in a way where you can be successful. What's a great example? Earlier in my career, I worked for an organization that was very successful, providing a major healthcare institution. But the culture of the organization was such that they weren't very direct. If there was an opportunity, they were less apt to come to you and say, you know what, TQ, you're an amazing leader. Here's some things we'd like to see you do a little different that may help you be more effective. I, being the type of leader that is direct, found that I was constantly hitting a wall. I was constantly having what seemed to be perception issues. And it became a challenge for me to be able to move forward. And at that time, I wasn't mature enough in my career to understand that I needed to have a sponsor or needed to understand how to fine tune and make some adjustments, not change who I was, but my adjustments would affect my approach to how I communicated. Once I met with a coach and I understood that my innate way of communicating was in conflict with the culture that I worked in, then we were able to talk about, now, how can you authentically still show up and be direct, but the language you use, how you approach the answer, how you suggest changes or partner in a team so that you can be accepted and viewed as an expert. Let's talk about personally. If we go back, I am married. And if you're in any relationship with another individual, you know there's going to be some conflict, right? You're not going to always agree. Same thing presented itself. I'm direct, but I found that the audiences or circles that I worked in sometimes weren't receiving that. And so me knowing that that's who I was, I began to hone the skill of sometimes there's a way to be direct in a way that it can be received in so that you can still reach your goal. So the third step, realizing what your strengths are, being able to effectively leverage them, allows you to understand the unique contributions you make. It's not the time to shy away, but it is a time to reflect and lean in on how I can be more effective in leveraging those strengths to be a great contributor, either personally or professionally. That's a lot to unpack in a small amount of time, but I hope that through what we've walked through in terms of, if you want to go to the next slide, what we've walked through in terms of knowing and defining your strengths, They're unique. They already exist inside of you. It's just number two, finding the right framework key to unlock what those strengths are. And then once you figure out what they are, spend some time, and it's a journey, spending time honing those skills to understand how you can show up to be your best self. I'd love to partner with you. If you'd love to reach out, my information is listed below. You can visit us at www.lipstickcoach.org. Or if you would love to reach out via phone, you can do that as well. But the contact information is on our website. Thank you so much. And I hope you have walked away with just a little bit more of understanding your strengths and how to show up authentically.
Thank you so much, TQ, for your time. Thank you for illustrating the great value of self-reflection and the power of being authentically you. As she mentioned, definitely reach out to her. She's a wealth of knowledge, not just in healthcare, but from a leadership and just in how to be a strong woman and really stand in your light, which is what Healing Purpose is all about. So thank you for taking time with us for R4Luxe.